Welcome to Buddha's Healing, a gentle space where we quietly reflect on the wisdom of the Buddha and learn how to soften suffering, heal the heart, and discover peace in every season of life. Dear friends, there comes a season of life after 70 when many people begin looking backward more often, not because they are stuck in the past, not because they are unhappy, but because time itself begins to feel different. The years seem shorter. Memories feel closer, the heart becomes more reflective, and quietly, many people begin asking themselves difficult questions. Did I spend my life wisely? What truly mattered? What do I wish I had done differently? Perhaps some people listening today understand this feeling deeply. A moment arrives unexpectedly, maybe while sitting quietly in the evening, looking through old photographs, watching grandchildren grow, thinking about people no longer here, and suddenly the mind begins revisiting old chapters of life, old choices, old priorities, old dreams. Some memories bring gratitude, others bring regret. Please hear this gently. Regret is deeply human. Every life contains it. Every heart carries some version of it, because no human life unfolds perfectly. No one always chooses wisely. No one always says the right thing. No one always understands what matters most while they are living through it. The Buddha understood this deeply. He gently reminded people, suffering grows when we cling to what cannot be changed, but wisdom grows when we learn from it with compassion. And perhaps that is the purpose of today's reflection. Not to judge the past, not to punish ourselves, not to reopen old wounds, but to gently learn. Because, dear friends, regret can either become a burden, or it can become wisdom. Today we are going to gently explore 5 regrets many people quietly carry after 70, and how the wisdom of the Buddha helps transform regret into peace before it is too late. Not because life is ending, but because peace matters now, perhaps more than ever. Together, we will gently reflect on time not spent with loved ones, years spent chasing work while forgetting to live, anger carried for too long, neglecting our own hearts while caring for everyone else, waiting too long to appreciate the present moment, and perhaps most importantly, how peace remains possible, even now. Please hear this gently. The purpose of reflection is not sadness. The purpose of reflection is awakening, because every day we are given still offers an opportunity to live differently, to love differently, to forgive differently, to soften, to heal. So before we continue, take one slow breath, let your shoulders soften, and gently ask yourself, what has life been trying to teach me? Because sometimes the wisdom hidden inside regret becomes the very thing that leads the heart home. Dear friends, let us gently begin with the first regret many people quietly carry after 71, of the most common and often one of the most painful, and that regret is not spending enough time with the people who mattered most. Please hear this gently. Few people reach their later years wishing they had spent more time worrying, more time rushing, more time chasing endless tasks. But many quietly wish they had spent more time with people they loved. A spouse, a parent, a child, a dear friend, a sibling, someone whose presence once felt ordinary, until one day it became precious. And perhaps many people listening today understand this feeling. Life moved quickly. Responsibilities filled the calendar. Work demanded attention. Bills needed paying. Children needed raising. Problems needed solving. And somehow the years passed. Not because love was absent, but because life was busy. Very busy. Then one day, the heart looks backward and softly whispers, I wish I had been there more. I wish I had listened more. I wish I had slowed down, dear friends. How quietly painful that becomes, because time is the one thing life never returns. The Buddha understood this deeply. He gently reminded people, everything is temporary. Every season, every relationship, every opportunity to sit beside someone we love. And perhaps many regrets are born not from lack of love, but from forgetting how precious ordinary moments truly were. Today we gently reflect on something important. Why do so many people regret time not spent with loved ones? The Buddha often taught about awareness, being present, seeing clearly. Because suffering often grows when we sleepwalk through what matters most. How often does this happen? A parent says, I spend more time with them later. A spouse says, things will slow down eventually. A friend says, I'll call next week, and dear friends, sometimes next week quietly becomes years. Life keeps moving, the days feel long, yet the years feel astonishingly short. Then suddenly, children become adults. Parents grow old, friends move away, loved ones pass on, and the heart realizes something difficult. The ordinary moments were never ordinary. The conversations, the dinners, the walks, the laughter, the simple evenings together, those moments were life itself. Please hear this gently. This reflection is not about guilt. It is about awakening, because the purpose of regret is not punishment. The purpose of regret is wisdom. Emotionally healthy people eventually learn something beautiful. Love is spelled with attention. Not perfection, not achievement, attention, presence, time. Imagine holding a handful of sand. At first, it feels like there is plenty, then slowly, grain by grain, it slips away. Life often feels this way too, especially relationships, dear friends. Perhaps many people after 70 discover something profound. The greatest treasures were never things. They were people, moments, conversations, connection. Please hear this gently. If someone you love is still here, there is still time. Time to call, time to listen, time to forgive, time to appreciate, time to say I love you, I'm grateful for you, I'm glad you're here. And perhaps tonight you may gently ask yourself, who matters most to me? Have I been truly present with them? Because sometimes, the wisdom hidden inside regret quietly teaches us how to love better. Today, there was a man named Thomas. He was 75 years old, living quietly in a small town outside Virginia. Most people described Thomas as successful. He had built a respectable career, provided well for his family, paid the bills, sent his children to college, worked hard for nearly 50 years. And honestly, much of his life had been spent doing what he believed a good man should do. Providing, protecting, working, sacrificing from the outside. There was much to be proud of. Yet quietly there was one regret he carried. A regret that visited him more often as the years passed. Time, not the lack of it, the way he spent it, especially with his son, Daniel. When Daniel was growing up, Thomas loved him deeply. There was never any doubt about that. But love often arrived through work, long hours, extra shifts, weekend overtime. The belief that providing financially was the greatest expression of care. And at the time, Thomas truly believed he was doing the right thing. Whenever Daniel asked him to play catch, Thomas often replied, maybe later. When Daniel wanted help building a model airplane, Thomas usually said, not today, buddy. When family dinners became rushed, Thomas told himself, I'm doing this for them, and in many ways he was. But life moved quickly, faster than he realized. One day Daniel was 10, then 15, then 20, then suddenly a grown man with children of his own. Years later, while sitting alone on the porch one evening, Thomas looked through old photographs. There was Daniel holding a baseball glove, Daniel riding a bicycle, Daniel graduating high school, and suddenly the regret surfaced again. Not because Thomas had been a bad father, but because he quietly wished he had been more present. He whispered softly, I wish I had slowed down. A few weeks later, Daniel came to visit. They sat together outside drinking coffee. After a long silence, Thomas quietly said, Can I tell you something? Of course. Thomas looked down. I wish I had spent more time with you when you were younger. Daniel smiled softly. Dad, you were always working. I know, Thomas sighed, but sometimes I think I missed too much. The conversation became quiet then. Daniel said something unexpected. You know what I remember? Thomas looked up. What? I remember that every time something truly mattered, you were there. The words landed gently, because somehow Thomas had spent years focusing only on what he missed, forgetting what he had given. Still, the regret remained, not as punishment, but as wisdom. Weeks later, at a mindfulness gathering, the teacher softly said, one of the saddest discoveries later in life is realizing that success cannot replace presence. Thomas sat very still. Then came another sentence, A sentence that stayed with him for months. The people we love rarely remember how busy we were. They remember how present we were. Something shifted, because suddenly, Thomas stopped treating regret as a wound and started seeing it as a lesson. That evening he called Daniel. Not because anything was wrong, not because there was important news, simply because he wanted to hear his son's voice. Over the following months, he called more often, visited more often, spent more time with his grandchildren, listened more, rushed less, and little by little, the regret softened, not because the past changed, but because the lesson finally became part of the present. Months later, Daniel smiled during a family dinner and said, "You seem happier lately, Dad." Thomas laughed softly. "I think I finally realized something. What is that love needs time, and somehow that understanding changed everything." Dear friends, perhaps there is a Thomas somewhere inside many of us, someone who loved deeply, worked hard, tried their best, yet quietly wishes they had spent more time with the people who mattered most. Please hear this gently. Regret does not always mean failure. Sometimes, regret simply reveals what the heart values most. And perhaps the lesson is not to punish ourselves for yesterday. Perhaps the lesson is to become more present today. Because, dear friends, if someone you love is still here, there is still time. Time for a conversation. Time for forgiveness. Time for appreciation. Time for connection. Perhaps tonight, you may gently ask yourself, who needs more of my presence? Who deserves a phone call? What truly matters now? Because sometimes, the wisdom hidden inside regret becomes the very thing that teaches us how to love more fully. If today's reflection touched your heart, please subscribe to Buddha's Healing and continue walking this journey of mindfulness, healing, and inner peace with us. And if there is someone you wish you had spent more time with, perhaps gently leave a comment below. Sometimes healing begins when we remember what truly matters. Dear friends, let us gently move into the second regret many people quietly carry after 71, that often hides behind achievement, responsibility, and a lifetime of hard work. And that regret is working too much and living too little. Please hear this gently. For many people, work was never only about money. It was about responsibility, providing, protecting, creating stability, taking care of family, doing what needed to be done, and there is dignity in that. There is honor in that. The Buddha never discouraged honest work. He understood the value of effort, commitment, and responsibility. But dear friends, many people eventually discover something painful. Life cannot be postponed forever. The heart cannot live entirely in the future. And after 70, many people quietly look back and wonder, why was I always rushing? Why didn't I slow down more? Why did I wait so long to enjoy life? Perhaps some people listening today understand this feeling deeply. For years there was always something important to do. Another project, another responsibility, another bill, another goal, another problem needing attention. And somehow the days became filled with obligations, while the simple joys quietly waited. A walk with a spouse, a quiet afternoon, a family dinner, a hobby, a sunset, a moment of stillness. Please hear this gently. Many regrets are not about what people did. They are about what they never allowed themselves to experience. Today we gently reflect on something important. What happens when achievement becomes more important than presence? The Buddha often reminded people that life is unfolding now, not someday, not later now. Yet how often do human beings quietly postpone living? Some people tell themselves, I'll rest after retirement. I'll enjoy life when things calm down. I'll spend more time with family next year. I'll focus on myself later. And dear friends, sometimes later arrives much faster than expected. The years pass. Children grow older. Health changes. People leave. Opportunities quietly disappear. And suddenly the heart realizes something difficult. The future it was waiting for has already become the past. Please hear this gently. There is nothing wrong with hard work, but life asks for balance. Because achievement can build a house, yet presence creates a home. Achievement can create security, yet connection creates meaning. Achievement can earn admiration, Yet peace comes from something deeper. The Buddha taught that endless craving often creates suffering, and sometimes the craving is not only for money. Sometimes it is for productivity, success, control. The belief that we must constantly do more, be more, achieve more. Emotionally healthy people eventually learn something freeing. Life is not a problem to solve. Life is an experience to live. Imagine standing at the top of a mountain after a lifetime of climbing. The view is beautiful. The achievements are real. The goals were reached. But then a quiet question appears. Did I notice the journey, dear friends? Many people after 70 discover that some of their happiest memories were never connected to success. They were connected to presence, laughing around a dinner table, holding a loved one's hand, watching children play, sharing coffee with a friend, sitting quietly beneath a summer sky. Simple moments, ordinary moments, moments that seemed small at the time, yet later become priceless. Please hear this gently. The purpose of this reflection is not guilt, it is awakening. Because even now, life is still happening. The opportunity to slow down is still here. The opportunity to appreciate today is still here. Perhaps tonight, you may gently ask yourself, have I been living or only preparing to live? Because sometimes the greatest wisdom arrives when we finally realize that peace was never waiting at the finish line. Peace was quietly walking beside us all along. There was a man named Robert. He was 73 years old, living quietly in a small town outside Washington state. If you asked Robert about his life, he would probably tell you he had been fortunate. A successful career, a comfortable retirement, a loving family, a home he had worked hard to build from the outside. It looked like a life many people would admire, and in many ways, it was, but quietly there was one regret that followed him. Not every day, not constantly, but often enough. Especially during quiet evenings, it was the feeling that he had spent too much of his life preparing for happiness, instead of living it. For nearly 45 years, Robert worked relentlessly. Long hours, business trips, weekend projects. Late nights, he told himself it was temporary, just a few more years, just one more promotion. Just one more goal. Then life would slow down. Then he would relax. Then he would enjoy the people he loved. But somehow the later he imagined never quite arrived. There was always another responsibility, another deadline, another reason to postpone rest. One evening, while sorting through old photographs, Robert found a picture of his family at a lake vacation decades earlier. His wife was smiling. His children were young. The sun was shining. Everyone looked happy. Then he noticed something in several of the photos. He wasn't there. He had stayed behind to take a work call, or answer emails, or finish something important at least, something that had felt important at the time. A strange sadness moved through him, not because he had failed, not because he had been selfish, but because he suddenly realized how many beautiful moments he had only partially lived. Weeks later, his daughter Sarah came to visit. While looking through the same photo album, Robert quietly said, "I wish I had slowed down more." Sarah looked at him. "What do you mean?" Robert smiled sadly. "I spent so much time working." Sarah nodded gently. "You worked hard for us." "I know." He paused. "But sometimes I think I forgot to enjoy the life I was working so hard to build." The room became quiet. Then Sarah reached for his hand. "Dad, you gave us a wonderful life." Robert smiled. "But I wish I had been present for more of it." That evening, the conversation stayed with him, not as guilt, but as wisdom. A few weeks later, Robert attended a mindfulness retreat for older adults. During one session, the teacher softly said, "Many people spend years chasing a future that never truly arrives." Robert sat very still. Then came another sentence, a sentence that stayed in his heart long after the retreat ended. "Do not sacrifice today's life for tomorrow's plans." Something shifted, because suddenly Robert understood. His regret was not really about work. It was about postponing presence, postponing joy, postponing rest, believing life would begin later, when in truth, life had been happening all along. From that day forward, he made small changes, not dramatic changes, gentle ones, longer conversations with friends, More time outdoors, more family dinners, more mornings spent watching the sunrise, more moments without rushing, and little by little, the regret softened. Not because the past changed, but because the lesson finally became part of the present. Months later, Sarah smiled during a family gathering. "You seem lighter lately." Robert laughed softly. "I finally stopped waiting for life to begin then." After a pause, he quietly added, "And that feels like freedom, dear friends." Perhaps there is a Robert somewhere inside many of us. Someone who spent years working hard, providing, achieving, doing what felt necessary, yet quietly wonders if life moved by too quickly. Please hear this gently. Hard work is honorable. Responsibility matters, but life asks for more than achievement. It asks for presence, connection, wonder, stillness, because, dear friends, no amount of success can replace a missed sunset, a missed conversation, a missed moment of love. And perhaps the wisdom hidden inside this regret is simple. Do not wait for someday to begin living, because today is life. This moment is life. This breath is life. Perhaps tonight, you may gently ask yourself, what joy have I been postponing? What moment deserves my attention? What would it feel like to be fully present today? Because sometimes the greatest peace comes when we stop preparing for life and finally begin living it. Dear friends, let us gently move into the third regret many people quietly carry after 71 that often stays hidden deep inside the heart for decades. And that regret is holding on to anger for too long. Please hear this gently. Few emotional burdens become heavier with time than unresolved anger, not because anger itself is unusual. Anger is deeply human. Every person has felt hurt, misunderstood, rejected, betrayed, disappointed, and sometimes those wounds leave scars. The problem is not that anger appears. The problem is when anger stays, year after year, decade after decade, quietly taking up space inside the heart. Perhaps some people listening today understand this feeling. A family conflict that never healed, a friendship that ended badly, a sibling disagreement, a painful betrayal, words spoken long ago that still echo in memory, and somehow even after many years, the emotional weight remains. Please hear this gently. Many people after 70 discover something surprising. The person they are most tired of carrying is not a burden, not a responsibility, not a problem. It is an old resentment. Because anger asks for energy, resentment asks for attention. Bitterness quietly asks the heart to keep reopening the same wound, and dear friends, how exhausting that becomes. Today we gently reflect on something important. Why does holding on to anger quietly steal peace? The Buddha often taught that anger hurts the one carrying it most. Not because forgiveness is easy, not because painful actions should be ignored, but because emotional suffering grows when the mind keeps feeding old wounds. How often does this happen? Someone remembers a painful event from 20 years ago, and immediately the body tightens, the heart hardens, the emotions return, as though the moment happened yesterday. The mind quietly says, I can forgive that. They hurt me too deeply. They don't deserve peace, and perhaps that feeling seems justified, but dear friends, the Buddha gently offered a difficult truth. Holding on to anger does not punish the past. It quietly punishes the present. Because every time resentment returns, the heart relives the suffering, again and again and again. Please hear this gently. Forgiveness is not approval. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is not pretending the hurt never happened. Forgiveness is releasing your own heart from endless captivity. Emotionally healthy people eventually learn something freeing. Peace becomes more valuable than being right. Imagine carrying a burning coal in your hand year after year. The coal does not hurt the person who caused the pain. It hurts the one holding it. Dear friends, many people after 70 quietly realize the resentment they carried so carefully never protected them. It only exhausted them. Please hear this gently. You do not have to excuse harmful behavior. You do not have to trust everyone. You do not have to reopen closed doors, but perhaps you can stop carrying the fire, because peace matters now, rest matters now, and your heart deserves freedom too. Perhaps tonight, you may gently ask yourself, Who am I still angry with? How much energy has this resentment cost me? What would freedom feel like? Because sometimes the greatest act of healing is not changing another person. Sometimes it is finally releasing the burden you were never meant to carry forever. There was a man named George. He was 78 years old, living quietly in a small town outside Kentucky. From the outside, George seemed peaceful, retired, comfortable, well-liked by neighbors, a regular at the local diner, someone who appeared content, but quietly. There was one burden he had carried for more than 30 years, a burden few people knew about: resentment toward his younger brother Michael. Years earlier, after their father passed away, a bitter disagreement emerged over the family property. Harsh words were spoken, accusations were made, feelings were hurt, and eventually the brothers stopped speaking. At first, George expected things to cool down a few weeks, maybe a few months. Then they would reconcile. But the weeks became years, the years became decades. Birthdays passed, holidays passed, family gatherings became awkward, then stopped altogether. And somehow, life kept moving. George married, worked, raised children, retired. Yet every time Michael's name came up, something inside tightened. The old anger remained, not loud, not dramatic, just quietly present like a stone in the heart. One afternoon, George's daughter Emma visited. While looking through old family photographs, she paused. "Dad, do you ever miss Uncle Michael?" George looked away. "Sometimes." Emma hesitated, then softly asked, "Have you ever thought about calling him?" Immediately the familiar resistance appeared. "He should call me." The answer came automatically. The same answer he had repeated for years. But later that evening, sitting alone on the porch, the question returned. "Do I miss him?" And for the first time in a long time, George answered honestly. Yes, he did. Not the argument, not the conflict, the brother, the fishing trips, the jokes, the shared childhood, the life they once knew. Weeks later, George attended a mindfulness gathering for older adults. During one session, the teacher softly said, "Many people spend years waiting for someone else to release a burden they are carrying themselves." George sat very still. Then came another sentence, a sentence that settled deeply into his heart. Sometimes forgiveness is not for the other person. Sometimes forgiveness is how we free ourselves. Something shifted, because suddenly, George realized something painful. For more than 30 years, the resentment had not protected him. It had not healed him. It had not changed the past. It had only occupied space inside his heart, space that could have held peace that evening. He sat quietly at the kitchen table, and for the first time he asked himself a different question, not who was right, but how much longer do I want to carry this? The answer came immediately, not much longer. A few days later, George picked up the phone. His hands trembled slightly, not because he knew what would happen, but because he did not. The phone rang, then a familiar voice answered. "Hello." For a moment, neither brother spoke. Then George quietly said, "Hi, Michael." Silence, then softly, "George." The conversation was not perfect. It did not erase 30 years overnight. There were pauses, awkward moments, old emotions. But there was also something else, relief. Months later, the brothers were not suddenly best friends, but they were talking, sharing meals occasionally, remembering old stories, allowing healing, and little by little, the stone inside George's heart grew lighter. One afternoon, Emma smiled and said, "You seem happier lately." George laughed softly. "I think I finally put something down." What? After a long pause, he quietly answered, 30 years of anger, dear friends. Perhaps there is a George somewhere inside many of us, someone carrying an old hurt, someone holding on to resentment, someone waiting for the past to change before allowing peace. Please hear this gently. The past may never change, the apology may never come, the misunderstanding may never fully disappear, but your heart still deserves freedom, because, dear friends, resentment is heavy, and after 70, peace becomes far more valuable than carrying old battles. Perhaps tonight you may gently ask yourself, what anger have I been carrying? What burden no longer serves me? What would it feel like to finally set it down? Because sometimes, Healing begins not when another person changes. Sometimes, healing begins the moment we stop carrying the fire. Dear friends, as we gently come to the end of today's reflection, perhaps the deepest truth resting beneath everything we explored is this: regret is not the enemy. Unhealed regret is. Regret can become a teacher, a guide, a quiet invitation to wake up. But when regret becomes punishment, the heart grows tired. Today, we gently reflected on some of the most common regrets many people carry after 70. Not spending enough time with the people who mattered most, working too much and living too little, holding on to anger for too long, neglecting the needs of the heart while caring for everyone else, waiting too long to choose peace, gratitude, and presence. Please hear this gently. Every one of these regrets points towards something beautiful: love, connection, forgiveness, balance, presence. The reason these regrets hurt is because they reveal what truly matters, and perhaps that is why they still have something valuable to teach us. The Buddha gently reminded people, the past cannot be changed, but our relationship with the past can again and again. He encouraged people not to become trapped by yesterday, not because yesterday did not matter, but because suffering grows when we cling to what no longer exists. Dear friends, perhaps many people spend years asking, why did I do that? Why did I know better? Why can't I go back? But perhaps the wiser question is, what is life teaching me now? Because wisdom does not come from perfection. Wisdom comes from reflection, compassion, understanding, growth. Please hear this gently. You do not need to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself for being human. You do not need to carry old mistakes forever. You do not need to replay every missed opportunity, especially now, because peace matters now, rest matters now, softness matters now, and perhaps the greatest gift you can give yourself after 70 is this: forgiveness. Forgiveness for what you did not know. Forgiveness for the seasons when you were overwhelmed. Forgiveness for the mistakes made while trying to survive. Forgiveness for being human. Because, dear friends, every life contains imperfections. Every heart contains regrets, yet every heart also contains the possibility of peace. Even now, perhaps tonight before sleep, you may place a hand gently over your heart, take one slow breath, and quietly ask yourself, what regret have I carried long enough? What lesson has it already taught me? What would happen if I finally chose peace? Because sometimes healing begins not when regret disappears. Sometimes healing begins when regret transforms into wisdom, and wisdom transforms into compassion. If today's reflection brought even a small sense of comfort, please subscribe to Buddha's Healing and continue walking this journey of mindfulness, healing, and inner peace with us. And if there is a lesson life has taught you through regret, perhaps gently share it in the comments. Sometimes wisdom grows when hearts learn together. May your regrets become teachers, may your heart become lighter, and may peace gently find its way back to you, one quiet breath at a time.